Hi and welcome to the Archive of History. Imagine standing at the very edge of the known world, where civilization meets the wild, where order confronts chaos, where a line of stone and mortar divides two worlds that can never truly be separated. It is just before dawn on the northern frontier of the Roman Empire. The year is somewhere in the middle of the 2nd century after the birth of Christ, though that name means little here, this far from Jerusalem, this far from Rome itself. You are standing on a wall. Not just any wall, but a barrier that stretches across an entire island, from one grey sea to another, 73 miles of worked stone rising from the windswept moorlands of northern Britannia. The mist is thick this morning, rolling in from the valleys below, obscuring the land to the north, that mysterious and threatening realm the Romans call Caledonia. The air is cold and damp, heavy with the smell of wet grass and distant peat smoke. Somewhere in the darkness, a trumpet sounds, its brazen note cutting through the pre-dawn stillness, calling the garrison to life. This is Hadrian's Wall. This is the northernmost fortified boundary of the Roman Empire, the point where Roman law, Roman roads, Roman discipline, and Roman certainty about the natural order of the world simply stop. Beyond this wall lies something the Romans cannot quite name or fully conquer, a land of dense forests and high mountains, of fierce tribes who paint themselves blue and who have never bent the knee to any emperor. You stand here not because you chose this posting, but because the machinery of empire has placed you here, one small human component in a vast system of control that stretches back southward across thousands of miles to the warm marble halls of Rome itself. You are cold. Your fingers are numb inside your woolen gloves. Your cloak, heavy with moisture, hangs from your shoulders like a burden, but you are here. And this is your duty, and duty is what holds the empire together. Before we drift off, I am always curious to know where my listeners are tuning in from and what time it is that they are listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. Tonight we will journey together to this remote frontier. We will walk the length of this magnificent wall. We will sleep in the barracks of its forts. We will stand watch in its mile castles and turrets. We will venture into the civilian settlements that sprawl beyond its gates. We will meet the men who guard it, the families who live in its shadow, the merchants who trade in its markets, and the tribesmen who watch it from the hills beyond. We will experience the bitter winters, the moments of violence, the long stretches of tedious routine, and the small human dramas that play out far from the attention of emperors and historians. This is not a story of great battles or famous generals. This is the story of daily life at the edge of empire, of ordinary people maintaining an extraordinary barrier in an extraordinary place. And so settle in now, find a comfortable position. Let the noise and light of the modern world fade away into darkness. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest on some distant point. Breathe slowly and deeply. We are going back across nearly 2,000 years, back to a time when this wall was new and strong and vital, when its purpose was clear and its garrison was proud. We are going to a place that no longer exists except in ruins and in memory, but which we can still visit in our minds, still walk through with wonder and with careful attention to the details that made it real. The journey begins now, in the cold mist of a northern morning, in a world that is at once utterly foreign and strangely familiar, at a place where history was made not by heroes, but by ordinary men and women doing their duty day after day, year after year on the wall. You arrived at the wall 3 weeks ago, though it feels like much longer. The journey north from Eboracum, the great legionary fortress the Britons call York, took nearly 10 days of hard marching through autumn rain. You are an auxiliary soldier, not a legionary, and that distinction matters more than you might have imagined before you took the oath. The legions, those elite formations of Roman citizens, are stationed in the great fortresses to the south, at York and Chester, ready to move north if serious trouble erupts. You and your comrades, recruited from the distant provinces of the empire, from Gaul and Germania and Hispania and even more distant lands, are the ones who actually hold the frontier. You are the garrison of the wall itself. The march north was a revelation. At first, the land seemed familiar enough, if colder and wetter than anything you had known in your homeland. There were Roman roads, straight and well-maintained, cutting through the countryside with geometric precision. There were towns, small but recognizably Roman, with forums and temples and bathhouses. There were villas in the distance, red-tiled roofs visible among the fields, proof that Roman civilization had taken root even here, at the far edge of the world. But as you marched further north, as the days passed, and the miles accumulated beneath your boots, the land began to change. The villas became fewer. The towns became smaller and more military in character. The forests grew thicker. The hills grew steeper and more barren. The natives you passed on the road, driving their cattle or carrying loads of firewood, seemed less Romanized, more tribal, watching your century pass with expressions that were difficult to read. And then, on the 9th day you saw it. The road crested a ridge, and there it was in the distance, a pale line of worked stone running east to west across the hills as far as you could see in either direction. Hadrian's Wall. Even from miles away, it was impressive, a testament to Roman engineering and Roman determination. As you marched closer, the scale of it became clear. This was no simple barrier, no rough palisade, such as might surround a frontier fort. This was a monumental structure, as tall as 2 men in most places, solidly built of dressed limestone blocks on the front and rear faces, with rubble and mortar packed between them for strength. Every Roman mile, you could see a small fortlet, what the soldiers call a mile castle, rising slightly higher than the wall itself. Between each pair of mile castles were 2 turrets, evenly spaced, giving the wall a rhythmic regularity that spoke of careful planning and military precision. Your century entered through one of the gates in the wall, passing beneath a stone arch, and you got your first close look at the structure you would be defending. The wall was 15 feet high in this section, crenellated along the top to provide protection for men walking the patrol route. Behind the parapet, there was a walkway wide enough for 2 soldiers to pass each other comfortably. The northern face, the one that looked out toward Caledonia, was smooth and vertical, an imposing face of stone. To the south the wall was backed by an earthen rampart that allowed men to climb up to the walkway. And further south still, perhaps 20 paces from the wall itself, a massive ditch had been dug, not for defense but to mark the military zone, the official boundary that civilians were not supposed to cross without permission. You were assigned to the fort called Vercovicium, though most of the soldiers simply call it housesteads, after the native name for the place. The fort sits astride the wall at one of its highest points, on the southern face of a dramatic ridge called the Windsill, where hard volcanic rock pushes through the softer limestone, creating a natural defensive position. From the north gate of the fort, the land drops away steeply, and on a clear day you can see for miles across the rolling hills and forests of the barbarian lands beyond. It is a commanding position, and whoever chose this site for a fort knew exactly what they were doing. The fort itself is larger than you had expected. It is shaped like a playing card, a rectangle with rounded corners enclosed by stone walls 20 feet high. At each corner there is a tower rising even higher, and in the middle of each of the 4 walls there is a fortified gate. The north gate, the one that looks out over the barbarian lands, is called the Porta Pretaria. It is the most impressive of the 4, with twin-arched passageways and chambers above for guards. The gate is always manned, always watched, and it is only opened when patrols are going out or when traders are being admitted under careful supervision. Inside the fort, the layout is standard, the same pattern that the Roman army uses everywhere from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the forests of Germania. The Principia, the headquarters building, stands at the center, its courtyard and administrative rooms the heart of the fort's military bureaucracy. Next to it is the Praetarium, the commander's house, where the prefect lives with his family in surprising comfort. There are granaries, their floors raised on pillars to keep the grain dry. There are workshops for blacksmiths and carpenters. There are stables for the horses, and there are the barracks, long narrow buildings divided into rooms, each room housing 8 men of a contubernium, the basic unit of the Roman army. Your contubernium, your tent party as they call it, though you live in stone buildings now, consists of yourself and 7 other men. There is Gaius, a stocky Batavian from the Rhine Delta who has been on the wall for 12 years and who knows every stone and every custom. There is Marcus, from southern Gaul, who can read and write and who keeps the contubernium's accounts. There is Titus, a huge German who speaks Latin with such a thick accent that you sometimes struggle to understand him. There is Quintus, a wiry Spaniard who claims to have served with the legions in Dacia before transferring to the auxiliaries, though no one quite believes him. There is Lucius, a Syrian, who worships strange Eastern gods and who keeps a small shrine in the corner of the barracks room. There is Felix, who is not Felix, not lucky at all, a depressed Briton from the south who drinks too much and who regrets ever taking the oath. And there is Secundus, the youngest of you all, barely 18, from some small town in Noricum that you have never heard of. These are your brothers now, the men you will live with, eat with, work with, and quite possibly die with. The barracks room is cramped, but surprisingly well appointed. Each pair of soldiers has a bunk, wooden frames with leather straps supporting mattresses stuffed with straw or wool. There is a small fireplace, though fuel is carefully rationed, and you are only allowed to burn coal or peat, not wood, which is too valuable. There are pegs on the walls for hanging equipment, and a wooden chest where each man keeps his personal possessions. The floor is flagstone, cold underfoot but easy to keep clean. There is a small window, shuttered against the wind, and when you first arrived you were amazed to discover that it even had glass in it, though of poor quality, greenish and full of bubbles. The whole room smells of wool and leather and smoke and unwashed men, a smell that becomes so familiar that you stop noticing it after a few days. On your first evening at the fort, Gaius took you aside and gave you the information that no officer would ever provide. He told you which centurions were reasonable and which were martinets. He told you which taverns in the vicus, the civilian settlement outside the fort's walls, were worth visiting and which would rob you. He told you about the local tribes, which ones traded peacefully and which ones occasionally raided the wall. He told you about the weather, warning you that the summer you had just missed was the only tolerable season and that you should prepare yourself for a winter more brutal than anything you had experienced before. He told you about the prefect, a career officer from an equestrian family who was decent enough but who was desperate for promotion and who therefore insisted on everything being done by the book. And he told you in a low voice about the things that were never written in official reports, about the soldiers who had deserted, about the woman who had been murdered in the vicus 2 years ago, about the man who had gone mad from loneliness and had thrown himself off the wall. You listened to all of this, trying to absorb it, trying to understand the reality of this place that would be your home for the foreseeable future, 25 years. That is the term of service for an auxiliary soldier. 25 years before you would receive your honesta missio, your honorable discharge, and with it the grant of Roman citizenship that was the reward for service. 25 years before you could legally marry, though many soldiers kept unofficial families. 25 years before you could return home, if home even existed anymore. You were 21 years old. You would be 46 when your service ended, if you survived. If disease or combat or accident or simple despair did not claim you first. Standing in the barracks on that first evening, listening to Gaius talk in the dim light of the fire, you understood for the first time the full weight of the oath you had taken. This wall, this fort, this frontier would define the rest of your life. Now let us walk the wall itself, for to understand life at this frontier, you must first understand the physical reality of the structure you are defending. It is morning 3 days after your arrival, and you have been assigned to your first patrol along the rampart. The mist has lifted slightly, though a thin grey haze still clings to the lowlands to the north. You climb the stone stairs from the interior of the fort to the walkway that runs along the top of the wall. The centurion who is leading this patrol is a grizzled veteran named Flavius, a man who has served at 3 different forts along the wall over the past 15 years. He moves with the easy confidence of someone who knows every stone of this structure, every weak point in its construction, every place where the wind cuts most sharply. The wall here, at the fort, is at its most impressive. The stone is well-cut limestone, each block roughly rectangular but with slight variations that required skill to fit together properly. The masons who built this section knew their craft. The joints are tight, the faces are smooth, and even after 30 years of wind and rain and frost, the structure shows few signs of weakness. The centurion slaps the parapet affectionately as he walks. This section will stand for centuries, he tells you. He has seen parts of the wall to the east where they used turf instead of stone, and those sections require constant maintenance, constant rebuilding. But here, on the hard volcanic sill, they built in stone, and they built to last. As you walk eastward along the rampart, Flavius explains the system to you. Every Roman mile, precisely 5,000 Roman feet, there is a mile castle. These are small fortlets built into the wall itself, with gates that allow patrols to pass through to the north, and with accommodation for a small garrison, perhaps 8 to 10 men. The mile castle gates are the only official crossing points along the wall, and they are carefully controlled. Between each pair of mile castles, there are 2 turrets, evenly spaced. These are observation posts, square stone towers rising slightly higher than the wall, with rooms for the men who man them, and with stairs leading up to flat roofs where sentries can watch the land beyond. The spacing is deliberate, designed so that each turret is visible from the ones on either side and from the mile castles, creating an unbroken chain of observation and communication along the entire length of the wall. You reach the first turret, turret 36B in the official numbering system, though the soldiers simply call it North Watch. 2 men are stationed here, on duty for a 6-hour shift. They look cold and bored, huddled in their cloaks against the wind. One of them is heating something over a small brazier, a watery porridge of barley and whatever scraps of meat or vegetable he has managed to acquire. The smell is not appetizing. Flavius exchanges a few words with them, asking if they have seen anything during the night. Nothing, they report. No smoke, no movement. No signals from the turrets to the east or west. It has been a quiet night, as most nights are. The centurion nods, makes a note on his wax tablet, and moves on. The wall continues eastward, following the dramatic ridgeline of the windsill. In places, the northern face drops away almost vertically, a cliff of grey rock and stone that would be nearly impossible to scale even without the wall. In these sections, the wall itself is slightly lower, since the natural defenses make a full-height barrier less necessary. But where the land to the north is more accessible, where the slope is gentler, the wall rises to its full 15 feet, an imposing barrier designed as much to intimidate as to defend. The psychological effect of the wall is something Flavius wants you to understand. This barrier is not really here to stop a massed invasion, he explains. The tribes to the north do not have the siege engines or the organization to assault a fortification of this scale. The wall is here to control movement, to channel trade and travel through official crossing points where taxes can be collected and undesirables can be turned back. It is a customs barrier as much as a military one, a physical manifestation of Roman authority over this landscape. You reach the next mile castle, Mile Castle 37, and pause to inspect it. The structure is impressive in its simplicity and functionality. The walls are thick stone, enclosing a rectangular space perhaps 40 feet by 60 feet. There are 2 gates, one on the north side that pierces the main wall and leads into barbarian territory, and one on the south side that opens into the empire. The north gate is heavy timber reinforced with iron, kept closed and barred unless a patrol is passing through. Above the gates, there are chambers for the garrison, small rooms with hearths and sleeping platforms and storage for weapons and supplies. The garrison here consists of 8 men, commanded by a junior officer. Their duty is to man the gates, to maintain this section of the wall, and to provide a safe haven for patrols. They also serve as customs officials, checking the traders and travelers who pass through during designated market hours, collecting the tolls and tariffs that help fund the military presence on the frontier. One of the garrison, a man named Aulus, knows Flavius and invites you to warm yourselves by the fire in the barracks room. The room is small and dim, heated by a central hearth where peat is burning with a pungent, earthy smell. There is not much furniture, just a few stools and a table worn smooth by years of use. On the walls, someone has scratched graffiti in Latin, crude jokes and complaints about officers and boasts about sexual conquests. There are also marks scratched by men counting the days until their discharge, little clusters of lines that stretch on and on, year after year. Aulus offers you water from a clay jug and complains about the monotony of mile castle duty. At least in the fort, he says, there is some variety, some company, some chance for entertainment in the vicus. Out here, it is 8 men in a stone box, staring at empty hills, day after day after day. Flavius has heard this complaint before. He ignores it, finishes his water, and moves on. The patrol continues. You walk another half-mile to turret 37A, then another mile to Mile Castle 38. The pattern repeats itself, the steady rhythm of Roman military organization. In some places, the wall runs straight for hundreds of yards, following the ridgeline with geometric precision. In other places, it bends slightly to take advantage of the terrain. You can see as you walk how the engineers planned this structure, how they surveyed the ground and chose the route and calculated the resources that would be needed. This was not built hastily or carelessly. This was the product of careful planning, of experienced architects and engineers who understood fortification and who had the full resources of the empire at their disposal. As you walk, Flavius tells you about the construction. The wall was built by legionaries, he explains, not auxiliaries. 3 legions were involved, based at York and Chester and Hadrian. They brought with them all the skills of military engineering that Rome had perfected over centuries of warfare. They quarried the limestone from sites along the wall's route. They made the mortar from lime and sand and water. They cut the stone into blocks. They transported everything by wagon and by hand. They dug the foundations down to bedrock wherever possible. They built the wall section by section, leaving stones projecting at intervals so that new sections could be bonded to old sections, creating a continuous structure. It took them 6 years to complete the original plan, 6 years of back-breaking labor in brutal weather, and even then the wall was not finished. Over the following decades, modifications were made, additional forts were added, the turf sections were rebuilt in stone, the system was refined and improved. You notice that to the south of the wall, perhaps 50 paces away, there is another massive earthwork, a wide ditch with earthen banks on either side. Flavius explains that this is the vallum, a defining feature of the frontier system. Unlike the wall itself, which faces north toward the barbarians, the vallum runs parallel to the wall on the southern side. It serves not as a military defense, but as a boundary marker, a clearly visible line that marks the military zone. Civilians are not supposed to cross the vallum without authorization. It keeps the supply roads clear. It prevents unauthorized settlement or farming too close to the wall. It ensures that the garrison has a clear field of view and operation. The vallum is less impressive than the wall, but in some ways it is just as important, a demonstration that Roman authority extends in both directions, north toward the barbarians and south toward the provincials. By the time the patrol returns to the fort, several hours have passed. Your legs are tired from walking on the uneven stone. Your face is raw from the wind. You have a new appreciation for the scale of this frontier system. The wall stretches for 73 miles from coast to coast, from the Solway Firth in the west to the Tyne estuary in the east. Along its length, there are 16 major forts, each garrisoned by an auxiliary cohort of 500 or 1,000 men. There are perhaps 80-mile castles and more than 150 turrets. The total garrison numbers somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 soldiers, and behind all of this, there is the infrastructure to support them, the supply depots and the granaries and the roads and the workshops and the administrative machinery that keeps the entire system functioning. This is Roman power made visible, Roman organization imposed on a landscape, a statement in stone that says we are here, we control this land, and we are not leaving. The rhythm of military life quickly establishes itself, a routine so regular and predictable that it begins to define your sense of time. Each day at the fort begins in the hour before dawn, when the watch changes and the trumpet sounds the call to assembly. You wake in darkness, cold and stiff, and pull yourself from the warmth of your blankets. The air in the barracks room is frigid despite the embers still glowing in the hearth. Around you your contubernium is stirring, men coughing and muttering curses as they reach for their tunics and cloaks. Outside, you can hear the sounds of the fort coming to life, the tramp of hobnailed boots on stone, the jangle of equipment, voices calling out in Latin and in a dozen other languages. You dress quickly, pulling on your woolen tunic, then your padded subarmalis, then your mail shirt which weighs heavily on your shoulders and which you have learned to distribute properly so it does not chafe. You fasten your belt, from which hangs your pugio, your dagger, and hang your gladius, your short sword, on the opposite side. You pull on your woolen trousers, your bracae, which would be considered effeminate in Rome but which are essential here in the north. You lace up your caligae, your military sandals with their thick hobnailed soles. You throw your sagum, your heavy rectangular cloak, over your shoulders and fasten it with a bronze brooch. The wool is damp and smells of smoke and sweat and lanolin. You pick up your helmet, check that the cheek pieces move freely, and tuck it under your arm. Finally, you take your pilum, your javelin, and your scatum, your rectangular shield, both of which you keep oiled and maintained according to regulations. You are ready for the day. The contubernium files out of the barracks and joins the other men of the century assembling in the courtyard. The centurion is already there. checking the roster with the optio, his second in command. Roll is called. Each man answers his name. The centurion walks down the line, inspecting equipment with a critical eye that misses nothing. A loose strap, a spot of rust on a blade, a helmet that sits crooked. Any deficiency is noted and will result in extra duties. But today your equipment passes muster. The centurion nods, satisfied, and assigns the day's duties. Some men are detailed to patrol duty, walking the wall and checking the turrets. Others are assigned to guard duty at the gates or in the watchtowers. Some will work in the granaries, checking the grain stores and making sure the rats have not gotten in. Some will report to the workshops, repairing equipment or constructing new fortifications. Some, the unlucky ones, will be assigned to latrine duty, cleaning the long stone trough where the garrison relieves itself. You are assigned to the morning patrol, a 6-hour shift walking the section of wall to the west of the fort. Before you can leave on patrol, there is breakfast, a quick meal eaten standing in the mess hall. The food is basic but adequate. There is porridge made from barley, flavored with a bit of olive oil and perhaps some onions if the supply wagon has come recently. There is bread, coarse and heavy, baked in the fort's ovens. There is posca, the sour wine vinegar drink that is the standard beverage of the Roman army, mixed with water to make it drinkable. If you are lucky, there might be some cheese or a piece of salted pork. You eat quickly, mechanically, fueling your body for the work ahead. The mess hall is noisy with conversation in many languages. The garrison of Vercovicium is drawn from all corners of the empire. You hear Gaulish and Germanic and Hispanic dialects of Latin, as well as Celtic and Aramaic and Greek. This babble of tongues is normal, unremarkable. The army is the great mixing pot of the empire, bringing together men who would never have met otherwise, forcing them to work together, to learn each other's languages, to become something new. The patrol leaves through the Porta Praetoria, the north gate, and climbs to the wall walk. The morning is clear and cold, with a sharp wind blowing from the northwest. Clouds are building on the horizon, dark and heavy with rain. You settle into the steady pace of the patrol, walking westward along the rampart, checking each section as you go. The routine is simple but important. You look for any signs of damage to the wall, any cracks in the stone or places where mortar has crumbled away. You check the turrets, making sure the sentries are awake and alert. You watch the land to the north, looking for any signs of activity, any smoke from campfires, any movement of men or animals that might indicate trouble. Most days you see nothing. The hills beyond the wall are empty and silent, covered in scrub and heather, dotted with ancient stone circles and abandoned settlements. But you watch anyway, because that is your duty, and because you never know when the empty landscape might suddenly come alive with threat. At midday, the patrol returns to the fort, and you are released for the afternoon. This is when you have time for yourself, though there is always something that needs doing. You might spend time maintaining your equipment, oiling your mail to prevent rust, sharpening your sword, checking your sandals for wear. You might visit the baths, if you have the energy and the spare coin for the admission fee. You might drill with your contubernium, practicing the formations and the sword work that must become second nature if you are to survive combat. The army drills constantly, endlessly, because the officers know that training is what keeps men alive. You practice the shield wall, standing shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, shields overlapping, moving as one unit. You practice the javelin throw, hurling your pilum at wooden targets, learning to judge distance and trajectory. You practice the gladius work, the short stabbing motions that are the foundation of Roman infantry combat. You do this over and over until your muscles ache and your hands are numb, until the movements become automatic, until you do not have to think about what to do when the enemy is in front of you. In the late afternoon there is more food, another simple meal of bread and porridge and perhaps some boiled vegetables if they are available. Then there are more duties. Perhaps you are assigned to evening watch, standing guard at one of the gates as the last of the day's traders leave the fort and the gates are closed and barred for the night. Perhaps you are detailed to firewood duty, helping to bring in the fuel that the fort consumes in astonishing quantities. Perhaps you have administrative work, helping the sentry's clerk with the endless paperwork that the army generates, reports and inventories and requests for supplies. The bureaucracy of the Roman military is vast and meticulous. Every piece of equipment is recorded. Every ration is accounted for. Every man's service record is maintained with careful detail. This is part of what makes the army function. this obsessive attention to documentation and procedure. As darkness falls, the trumpet sounds again, calling the garrison to evening assembly. Roll is called once more. Any announcements are made, orders for the next day, punishments for infractions, commendations for good work. Then the men are dismissed to their barracks. The evening is your own, a few precious hours before the need for sleep becomes overwhelming. In the barracks room, the fire is built up, precious fuel burning to drive back the cold. Some men gamble, throwing dice or playing board games, wagering copper coins they can ill afford to lose. Some men write letters home, laborious efforts in Latin or in their native languages, letters that may take months to reach their destinations and which may never receive replies. Some men simply talk, telling stories, complaining about officers, boasting about women, dreaming of the day they will receive their discharge and their citizenship and their plot of land. Some men drink, if they have wine or beer, though drunkenness is a flogging offense and the centurions have little tolerance for it. Some men pray, quietly, to whichever gods they worship, asking for protection, for health, for survival. You lie on your bunk, wrapped in your blankets, listening to the sounds of the barracks settling for the night. Outside you can hear the wind howling across the ramparts. You can hear the sentries calling out the watch, marking the hours of the night. You can hear distantly the sounds of the vicus, the civilian settlement beyond the fort's southern wall, where there are taverns and brothels and shops and houses, a world that is separate from the military discipline of the fort, but which exists because of it, parasitic and symbiotic at the same time. You are tired, bone tired from the day's work and the ceaseless routine. But sleep does not come easily. Your mind runs through the day's events, the patrol, the drill, the inspections. You think about home, wherever that was, a place that grows more distant in memory with each passing month. You think about the future, the years stretching ahead of you, this same routine repeated day after day, season after season, year after year. And you think about the wall, that massive barrier of stone just beyond these barracks, the thing that defines your existence here, the line between civilization and chaos, between order and the unknown. Finally, exhaustion overtakes thought, and you drift into sleep, a sleep that will be interrupted in a few hours by the trumpet call that will begin the whole routine again. Beyond the southern wall of the fort, separated from the military world by a clear boundary, but intimately connected to it, sprawls the vicus. This is the civilian settlement, a small town that has grown organically over the decades since the fort was built. It is a messy, vital, chaotic place, so different from the geometric order of the military compound that it seems to belong to a different world entirely. Yet the two are inseparable. The fort could not function without the vicus, and the vicus would not exist without the fort. They are two halves of the same organism, military and civilian, discipline and freedom, order and commerce. On your first free day, when you have no duties after the morning assembly, Gaius offers to show you the vicus. You walk out through the south gate of the fort, past the guards who nod at Gaius, recognizing him as a regular visitor. The moment you cross the threshold, the atmosphere changes. The vicus is loud and crowded and alive with activity. The main street, unpaved and muddy, is lined with buildings of all kinds, some of stone, some of timber, some a mixture of both. The architecture is a hodgepodge, part Roman, part native British, with influences from all the cultures represented in the garrison. There are shops with open fronts displaying their goods, smithies, where sparks fly from forges, taverns with painted signs, workshops where craftsmen ply their trades, and houses where families live, somehow carving out domestic spaces in the midst of this frontier settlement. The first thing that strikes you is the diversity of people. There are soldiers off duty, of course, easily identified by their military bearing and their short hair and clean-shaven faces. But there are also civilians of every description. There are merchants from across the province and from further afield, men who make their living supplying the garrison with goods that cannot be produced locally. There are craftsmen, cobblers and leatherworkers and potters and weavers, their workshops humming with activity. There are traders from the north, barbarians by Roman standards, with long hair and tattoos and colorful Celtic clothing, who have come through the gates to sell their goods or to buy Roman imports. There are women, many women, a surprise after the exclusively male environment of the fort. Some are wives of soldiers, though officially soldiers cannot marry until they receive their discharge, so these unions are unofficial but widely tolerated. Some are shopkeepers or innkeepers, running businesses in their own right. Some are prostitutes, a significant presence in any garrison town, women who provide services that the army requires but does not officially acknowledge. Gaius leads you to one of the taverns, a timber building with a thatched roof and a painted sign showing a bull. Inside, the room is dim and smoky, warmed by a large hearth in the center. The floor is packed earth covered with straw. Long tables and benches fill the space, occupied by a mix of soldiers and civilians, all drinking and talking and gambling. The tavern keeper, a Gaulish man named Dubnus, greets Gaius like an old friend and brings you cups of cervezia, a Celtic-style beer brewed locally from barley. It is thick and slightly sour, not at all like wine, but after a few sips you find it pleasant enough, warming and mildly intoxicating. Gaius knows everyone here, and he introduces you to a stream of characters. There is Vindex, a former auxiliary who served his 25 years and took his discharge and chose to stay at the wall, opening a workshop where he makes military equipment, tents and straps and harness. He is prosperous now, a respected member of the community, proof that there is life after service for those who want to stay. There is Saturnina, a native British woman who runs a small shop selling pottery and cooking utensils, much of it imported from the south, but some made locally. Her husband was a soldier who died on patrol 5 years ago, but she has continued his business and raised their 3 children here in the Vicus. There is Antigonus, a Syrian merchant who brings exotic goods from the east, spices and incense and fine fabrics, luxuries that the officers and the wealthier civilians crave. He speaks half a dozen languages fluently and seems to have connections everywhere. And there is Luvia, a young woman who serves drinks in the tavern, who has bright eyes and a quick smile, and who Gaius warns you not to fall in love with, as a dozen soldiers before you have done so to their regret. The conversation in the tavern is easy and relaxed, a mix of gossip and politics and humor. You hear complaints about the prefect's latest inspection regime. You hear speculation about whether the grain shipment will arrive before the roads become impassable with winter mud. You hear stories about the tribes to the north, which ones are friendly this year and which ones are causing trouble. You hear darker stories too, about a deserter who was caught and flogged, about a trader who was robbed on the road from Corbridge, about a woman from the Vicus who disappeared 2 months ago and who has not been found despite searches. The Vicus is not a safe place, not really. It exists on the edge of civilization, and it attracts a certain type of person, the ambitious and the desperate, the hopeful and the criminal. But it also offers opportunities that do not exist anywhere else on the frontier, chances to make money, to build a life, to be part of something vital and growing. After several hours in the tavern, Gaius takes you to see the bathhouse. This is one of the most important buildings in the Vicus, a substantial stone structure with multiple rooms and a sophisticated heating system. Roman soldiers expect baths wherever they are stationed, and the garrison at Vercovicium is no exception. The bathhouse is privately owned, run by a consortium of local businessmen who charge admission fees. It is expensive, but it is worth it. You pay your few bronze coins at the entrance and step inside. The bathhouse is a revelation. A taste of civilization in this remote place. The sequence of rooms follows the standard Roman pattern. You begin in the apodyterium, the changing room, where you leave your clothes in a niche in the wall, trusting that they will not be stolen though you take your purse with you. Then you move to the tepidarium, the warm room, where the heat begins to open your pores and relax your muscles. The room is heated by a hypocaust system, a brilliant piece of engineering where hot air from a furnace circulates beneath the raised floor and through channels in the walls. The floor is so hot that you must wear wooden sandals to avoid burning your feet. You sit on stone benches feeling the warmth seep into your bones, feeling the cold and tension of military life melting away. From the tepidarium, you move to the coldarium, the hot room, where the heat is intense and steam fills the air. There is a large bath here filled with hot water, and you immerse yourself, feeling your muscles unknot, feeling clean for the first time in days. Other soldiers are here too, and the conversation is easy and friendly, the social barriers of rank and unit less rigid in the democracy of the baths. You wash with olive oil and a strigil, the curved bronze scraper that removes dirt and sweat. Then you move to the frigidarium, the cold room, where you plunge into a pool of cold water, the shock of it making you gasp and bringing you fully alert. Finally, you return to the changing room, dress and emerge into the afternoon light feeling renewed, feeling human again. The vicus also contains temples and shrines, places where the diverse population of the frontier can worship their gods. There is a small temple to Jupiter, the chief god of the Roman pantheon, where the official military ceremonies are held. There is a shrine to the local Celtic gods, respected and incorporated into Roman practice in the typical pragmatic Roman fashion. And there is, Gaius tells you in a whisper, a Mithraeum, an underground temple to Mithras, the mystery cult from Persia that is immensely popular among soldiers. He promises to take you there soon, when you are ready, when you have proven yourself trustworthy. The cult is secretive, open only to initiates, and it offers a sense of brotherhood and meaning that many soldiers find essential to surviving the hardships of frontier life. As evening approaches, you return to the fort with Gaius, walking back through the south gate just before it closes for the night. The vicus has made an impression on you. It is rough and unpolished, but it is alive in a way that the fort, for all its order and discipline, is not. It is a place where human life in all its messy diversity plays out, where soldiers and civilians mix, where business is done and families are raised and pleasures are sought and troubles are drowned in beer. It is where the military machine of empire intersects with the human reality of the frontier. And you know that you will spend much of your free time here over the years to come, seeking companionship and distraction, looking for anything that can make the endless routine of military service more bearable. The vicus is part of the wall too, just as essential as the stone and the forts and the soldiers. It is the human part, the part that cannot be drilled or disciplined into submission, the part that endures. To truly understand the garrison that defends the wall, you must understand who these men are, where they come from, and why they are here. The soldiers who stand watch on Hadrian's wall are not Roman in the way that term is commonly understood. They are not citizens from Italia. They do not speak Latin as their mother tongue, though most have learned it well enough to follow orders and conduct basic administration. They are auxiliaries, men recruited from the provinces and the conquered territories of the empire, men whose service will earn them the citizenship they do not yet possess. They are the empire's working-class soldiers, less prestigious than the legionaries, but no less essential to maintaining Roman power. Your cohort, the first cohort of Tungrians, originally came from the region the Romans call Germania Inferior, the land of the Tungri people in what is now the Low Countries. But after a century of recruitment and transfer and attrition, the unit's composition has become mixed. There are still some men who can claim descent from the original Tungrian warriors who were first conscripted into Roman service generations ago, but there are also Gauls and Britons and Germans from other tribes and even a few men from the distant eastern provinces. The unit's ethnic identity has become more about shared tradition and esprit de corps than about actual bloodline. You are Tungrians because you serve in a Tungrian cohort, because you carry the unit's standards and fight under its name and honor its history. Walk through the barracks of Vercovicium, and you will hear a symphony of languages. In the room next to yours, there is a contubernium of Batavians, men from the Rhine Delta, who are famed as cavalry and who speak a Germanic dialect that is incomprehensible to you. Down the corridor, there is a group of Gauls from Aquitania, men with Celtic names who worship Celtic gods, but who have thoroughly adopted Roman military culture. In the fort's cavalry barracks, there is a turma of Spanish horsemen, proud men from the hills of Asturica who maintain their own traditions and who look down slightly on the infantry. And in the administrative offices, there are clerks and scribes from all over the empire, men who have enough education to read and write Latin fluently and who keep the vast bureaucratic machine functioning. This diversity is not accidental. It is Roman policy, carefully designed to prevent units from becoming too attached to their home regions, too inclined to rebellion or disloyalty. Auxiliary cohorts are never stationed in their own homelands. The Tungrians guard the wall in Britannia, far from Germania. The British auxiliary units serve in Germania or Rositia or Pannonia, far from Britain. This ensures that the troops have no local ties that might conflict with their duty to Rome. It also ensures that auxiliary soldiers, who serve for 25 years before receiving citizenship, have every incentive to remain loyal to the system that will eventually reward them with that precious legal status. The social hierarchy within the garrison is complex and strictly observed. At the top is the prefect, the commanding officer of the cohort. He is an equestrian, a member of Rome's second social class, the tier just below the senatorial aristocracy. He has probably commanded auxiliary units in several provinces before receiving this posting. He is educated, ambitious, and connected. He lives in the Praetorium with his family, enjoying a standard of living that approximates what he would have in Rome, complete with heated rooms and fine tableware and imported wine. He is a career officer, and this command on the wall is one step on a ladder that he hopes will lead to higher positions, perhaps a prefecture in Egypt or an administrative post in one of the more prestigious provinces. Below the prefect are the centurions, the backbone of the army. These are professional soldiers who have risen through the ranks on merit. Some are Roman citizens, some are not yet, but all are experienced and capable. They command the centuries, the basic tactical units of the cohort, and they are responsible for discipline, training, and the welfare of their men. A good centurion is respected and obeyed without question. A bad centurion is feared and despised, but still obeyed, because the penalties for disobedience are severe. The centurions live better than the common soldiers, with private quarters and better rations, but they are not wealthy. They are professionals, men who have made the army their life and who expect to serve until they are physically unable to continue. Below the centurions are various ranks of junior officers and specialists. There are the obcherins, the second-in-commands who assist the centurions. There are the standard-bearers who carry the unit's symbols in battle and on parade. There are the clerks and accountants who manage the unit's finances and keep the records. There are the medical orderlies who treat the sick and wounded. There are the engineers and surveyors who maintain the fortifications. And there are the various grades of common soldiers from the probatiae, the new recruits like yourself who are still learning, to the immunes, experienced soldiers who have been excused from routine duties because they possess specialized skills, to the senior soldiers who have served for decades and who know everything there is to know about military life. The ethnic mixing extends to religion as well. Walk through the vicus or look in the barracks, and you will find a bewildering array of gods being worshipped. There is Jupiter and Mars and the official Roman pantheon, of course, honored in the formal military ceremonies. But there are also the old Celtic gods of the Britons, gods of water and sky and forest, who have been incorporated into Roman practice and given Latin names. There are Germanic gods worshipped by the soldiers from the Rhine. There are Eastern gods brought by merchants and soldiers from Syria and Mesopotamia. And there is Mithras, the Persian god of light and contracts, whose mystery cult has spread throughout the army. The Romans are remarkably tolerant of religious diversity, as long as the basic civic rituals are observed and as long as loyalty to the emperor is maintained. You can worship whichever gods you choose, as long as you also honor the genius of the emperor and participate in the official military ceremonies when required. This ethnic and religious diversity does not create harmony. Exactly. There are tensions, prejudices, rivalries between different groups. The Batavians look down on the foot soldiers. The Gauls mock the Germans for their poor Latin. The Easterners are viewed with suspicion because their customs are so foreign. The native Britons in the garrison are caught between two worlds, Roman and Celtic, never quite fully accepted by either. But the military discipline holds all of this together. Whatever tensions exist, whatever prejudices men harbor, they must be set aside when duty calls. On the wall, when the trumpet sounds the alarm, you must trust the man next to you, regardless of where he comes from or what gods he worships. The army creates its own identity, its own culture that transcends ethnicity. You are all soldiers first, subjects of Rome, defenders of the frontier. Everything else is secondary. The reality of auxiliary service is hard and often thankless. The pay is modest, less than half what a legionary receives. The conditions are harsh, especially here in the north, where the weather is brutal and the comforts are few. The work is dangerous, not always from combat, but from disease and accident and simple exposure. Men die from fever, from infected wounds, from falls during construction work, from drowning in rivers during patrols. The mortality rate is significant. Of the 80 men in a century, perhaps 20 will not survive to complete their full term of service. This is understood, accepted as part of the bargain you made when you took the oath. You serve for 25 years, and if you survive, you receive your citizenship and your veteran's grant, a plot of land or a sum of money, and you are free. If you do not survive, well, that is the risk you accepted. But despite the hardships, there is pride in the service. You are part of something larger than yourself, part of a system that has brought order and civilization to much of the known world. You are defending the empire, holding the line against chaos, and you are part of a brotherhood, a military family that will support you and remember you. The unit is everything. Your contubernarium, your century, your cohort. These are your family now. The men around you are your brothers, bound to you by shared hardship and shared purpose. This bond is what makes the service bearable, what gives it meaning. You will stand watch on the wall in the bitter cold, because your brothers are standing with you. You will face danger because your brothers are facing it too. And when you die, if you die, your brothers will mourn you and remember your name and ensure that your spirit is honored. This is the unspoken promise of military service, the trade you have made. You give your life to the empire, and the empire, through the institution of the army, gives you purpose and belonging, and the chance, if you are fortunate, to become something more than you were before. The wall divides the world in two, but the division is not as absolute as it might seem from the ramparts. To the north are the barbarians, the peoples the Romans have never fully conquered, but these barbarians are not the savage hordes of Roman propaganda. They are complex societies with their own cultures and hierarchies and histories. They are farmers and herders and craftsmen. They are warriors when they need to be, but they are many other things as well. And their relationship with Rome is complicated, a mix of trade and tribute, warfare and diplomacy, resentment and pragmatic cooperation. The tribes beyond the wall are diverse. There are the Selgovae in the west, the Votadini in the east, the Novantae in the far northwest, and further north beyond the reach of Roman knowledge, the mysterious Caledoni and Maetae, who inhabit the highlands and who have never submitted to Rome. These tribes speak Celtic languages related to those spoken in Gaul and southern Britannia. They live in hill forts and farming settlements. They raise cattle and sheep, grow barley and oats, work bronze and iron. Their warriors are skilled and fierce, fighting with spears and swords and round shields, their bodies sometimes painted with woad, their long hair and mustaches marking them as distinctly un-Roman. But they are not primitive. They have trade networks that stretch across Britain and into Ireland. They have druids who serve as priests and judges and keepers of oral tradition. They have complex social structures with kings and nobles and warriors and farmers and slaves. The wall is not, in fact, a hermetically sealed barrier. There are controlled crossing points, gates in the mile castles that are opened at designated times to allow trade. On market days the gates swing open, and the tribesmen come through, leading pack horses loaded with goods. They bring cattle and sheep to sell to the garrison. They bring hides and furs, valuable in the cold climate. They bring hunting dogs, prized by Roman officers. They bring metalwork, bronze brooches and iron tools made by skilled native smiths. They bring food, grain and meat and cheese, welcomed by the garrison whose official rations are monotonous. In return they buy Roman goods, pottery and glass and metalwork of a quality they cannot produce themselves. They buy wine though they prefer their own beer. They buy weapons though officially this trade is restricted. They buy luxury goods, fine fabrics and jewelry, things that their own nobles crave as status symbols. The market that takes place just outside the north gate of the fort is a fascinating collision of cultures. You see Roman soldiers in their military gear standing next to tribal warriors in their colorful cloaks and torques. You hear Latin and Celtic languages mixing. You see Roman coins changing hands, though barter is still common. The Roman officers maintain order, ensuring that the peace is kept, but they do not interfere too much in the actual trade. Commerce is encouraged. It benefits the garrison by providing fresh supplies. It benefits the locals by giving them access to Roman goods, and it provides intelligence. The traders who come through the gates are carefully watched and questioned. What is happening in the north? Are there disputes between tribes? Are there signs of alliance forming, signs that might indicate future trouble? The market is as much an intelligence-gathering operation as a commercial one. There is also the question of scouts and spies. Rome has always understood the value of local knowledge. Many of the garrison's most valuable soldiers are Britons from the tribes south of the wall, men who know the land and the people, and who can move in the north without attracting attention. These scouts, called explorators in Latin, venture beyond the wall on regular patrols, gathering information, watching for signs of unrest, maintaining contact with friendly chiefs. It is dangerous work. A scout captured by a hostile tribe might face torture or death. But it is essential work, the eyes and ears that allow the garrison to anticipate threats before they materialize. And then there are the more personal connections. Despite official regulations, there is considerable mixing between the garrison and the local population. Soldiers take British women as unofficial wives. Children are born half Roman, half tribal, growing up in the vicus or in the villages beyond the wall, belonging fully to neither world. Roman officers sometimes form alliances with tribal leaders, cemented by gifts or by marriage arrangements. Tribal nobles sometimes send their sons to be educated in Roman ways, a form of hostage-taking that is dressed up as cultural exchange. The frontier is porous in ways that official policy does not acknowledge. The wall is a line on the land, but it does not completely separate the peoples on either side of it. But there is also violence. The relationship is not all trade and intermarriage. There are raids, sometimes by young warriors seeking to prove themselves, sometimes by tribes who have a grievance against Rome. Cattle are stolen from farms south of the wall. Patrols are ambushed on the roads. Isolated mile castles are attacked. The garrison responds with patrols and punitive expeditions, burning villages, taking prisoners, demonstrating Roman power. It is a low-intensity conflict, not the glorious warfare of legionary campaigns, but a grinding, ongoing struggle that defines life on the frontier. You experience this firsthand one autumn morning when the alarm is raised. Smoke has been seen to the north, and scouts report that a village friendly to Rome has been attacked. The prefect orders a patrol in force, 2 centuries of infantry and a turma of cavalry, to investigate and respond. You are part of the patrol. You march out through the north gate in formation, shields and javelins ready, moving at the quick march through the hills beyond the wall. The land here is wild and beautiful, rolling moorland covered in heather and gorse, with rocky outcrops and small streams and distant mountains on the horizon. But it is also dangerous, every fold in the ground a potential ambush site. After several hours of marching, you reach the village. It is a small settlement, a cluster of round houses with thatched roofs, surrounded by a low earthen bank. Smoke still rises from one of the houses that has been burned. The villagers, mostly women and old men and children, come out to meet the patrol. Through an interpreter, they tell their story. A band of warriors from a hostile tribe to the west came in the night. They killed 3 men who tried to resist. They took cattle and sheep and several young women. They burned a house as a warning. Then they disappeared back into the hills. The centurion questions the villagers carefully, trying to determine which tribe was responsible, which direction the raiders went, how many men were involved. The answers are unclear. Perhaps 20 warriors. Perhaps from the Selgovae. Perhaps they went north toward the high ground. Perhaps. The centurion makes a decision. The patrol will pursue for a few miles, see if they can catch the raiders, or at least recover some of the stolen livestock. But they will not go too far. The risk of ambush is too high, and the prefect will be angry if an entire century is lost chasing cattle thieves. The pursuit is fruitless. You march through the hills for the rest of the day, following tracks that lead north and then vanish on rocky ground. The cavalry ranges ahead, scouting, but they find nothing. The raiders are gone, swallowed by the vast landscape of forest and moor. By late afternoon, the centurion calls off the pursuit. You march back to the village, where the soldiers help the villagers extinguish the fire and distribute some food from the patrol's rations as a gesture of goodwill. Then you march back to the wall, arriving after dark, tired and frustrated. This is the reality of frontier warfare. Not glorious pitched battles, but raids and counter-raids, ambushes and pursuits. A constant low-level conflict that accomplishes little but which cannot be ignored. The tribes test Roman strength. The Romans respond with shows of force. The cycle continues, year after year, decade after decade. Occasionally there is a larger conflict, an uprising that requires multiple units to suppress, or a punitive campaign that crosses into Caledonia to punish a particularly troublesome tribe. But mostly it is this, small-scale violence that is as much a part of life on the wall as the weather or the routine of garrison duty. Yet for all the violence, there is also a grudging respect between the two sides. The Roman soldiers respect the toughness and courage of the tribal warriors. The tribesmen respect Roman discipline and organization. Both sides understand that they are locked in a relationship that neither can fully escape. The wall is the physical manifestation of this relationship, a barrier and a meeting point, a line of division and a place of exchange. It is the edge of empire, but it is also a threshold, a place where 2 worlds meet and mix and struggle and sometimes find accommodation. You stand on that threshold, a soldier in service to Rome, defending a line that is both absolute and permeable, keeping a peace that is always fragile, always contested, always essential to the functioning of the frontier system. This is your duty and your burden, to hold the wall, to maintain the balance, to be the guardian of a border that divides worlds. As autumn deepens and the days grow shorter, you begin to understand what the veteran soldiers mean when they speak of winter at the wall with a mixture of dread and dark humor. The first snows come in early November, light dustings that melt by midday but which signal the beginning of the hard season. The temperature drops steadily. The wind from the north becomes a constant presence, a howling force that seems to penetrate every gap in your clothing, every crack in the stone walls. The sky turns grey and remains grey for days on end, a low oppressive ceiling that makes the landscape feel smaller, more claustrophobic. By December, the full weight of winter has descended on the frontier. Snow covers the ground, not the romantic snow of poetry, but a harsh, freezing layer that makes every task more difficult. The roads become treacherous, and the supply convoys from the south become less frequent. The garrison must rely more heavily on the stores in the granaries, the salted meat and grain that was stockpiled during the summer and autumn. Fresh food becomes scarce, vegetables disappear entirely, the diet becomes monotonous, porridge and bread and salt pork, day after day, week after week. The men grow thinner, paler, more irritable. The worst part of winter is standing watch on the wall. The duty cannot be avoided, regardless of the weather. The frontier must be guarded, and so you find yourself on a dark January morning, climbing the stairs to the rampart to begin a 6-hour watch shift. The wind is fierce, driving snow into your face, making it hard to see more than a few yards. You are wearing every piece of clothing you own, layers upon layers of wool, but it is not enough. The cold seeps through everything. Your fingers go numb inside your gloves, your toes lose feeling inside your boots. Your face becomes a mask of ice, your breath freezing on your scarf, your eyelashes crusting with frost. The other soldier on watch with you is Titus, the big German from your contubernum. He is suffering as much as you are, stamping his feet, slapping his arms against his sides, trying to maintain circulation. The two of you huddle against the parapet, seeking what little shelter it provides from the wind. You take turns scanning the landscape to the north, looking for any sign of movement, though you know that no sane person would be out in this weather. The hills are invisible, hidden by the driving snow. All you can see is a wall of white, shifting and swirling in the wind. After what feels like hours but is probably only one, you are allowed to retreat to the turret for a brief respite. The turret offers some shelter from the wind, though it is hardly warm. There is a small brazier burning, fueled by precious charcoal, giving off a weak heat that barely reaches beyond arm's length. You and Titus crowd around it, holding your hands over the coals, trying to thaw your fingers enough to retain some dexterity. The other guards in the turret, men from a different century, share their posca, warming the sour wine over the brazier until it steams. You drink it gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, momentarily driving back the cold. The conversation in the turret is desultory, broken by long silences. Someone complains about the centurion. Someone else tells a joke, crude and not particularly funny, but it draws tired laughs anyway. Someone wonders aloud when the supply convoy will arrive, if it will arrive at all, if the roads are snowed in. Someone else talks about home, wherever that was, and everyone falls silent because talking about home in weather like this, in a place like this, is almost unbearable. Better to focus on the immediate, on getting through the next hour, the next watch shift, the next day. When your brief rest is over, you must return to the rampart. The cold hits you again like a physical force, all the worse for the momentary warmth you experienced in the turret. You resume your position, scanning the empty whiteness, performing your duty because duty is all that holds the system together. And slowly, agonizingly, the hours pass. The sky begins to lighten, though the sun remains invisible behind the clouds. The wind does not abate. The snow continues to fall. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the relief watch arrives. Men as cold and miserable as you are, coming to take their turn on the rampart. You are released, and you stumble down the stairs through the fort, back to the barracks, moving like an old man, your joints stiff, your limbs barely responding to commands. In the barracks, the fire has been built up, and the room is blessedly warm. You shed your soaking cloak and outer layers, hanging them to dry near the hearth. You huddle by the fire, drinking hot water mixed with a bit of wine, feeling life slowly return to your extremities. The pain as your fingers and toes thaw is intense, a burning sensation that makes you grit your teeth. But at least you are alive. At least you are inside. At least the watch is over for now. You collapse onto your bunk, still wearing most of your clothes, and fall into an exhausted sleep. This is winter at the wall, and it goes on for months. The psychological toll is as great as the physical one. The isolation becomes oppressive. The fort is cut off from the world, surrounded by a landscape that is hostile and empty. The routine becomes numbing. The same tasks day after day in the cold and dark and snow. Morale suffers. There are fights in the barracks, men snapping at each other over trivial disputes, boredom and confinement fraying tempers. There are cases of depression, men who stop talking, who lie on their bunks staring at the ceiling, who have to be forced to eat and to perform their duties. There are desertions, though where a man thinks he will go in the middle of winter on the northern frontier is unclear. The deserters are usually caught, and the punishments are severe, floggings or worse, examples to discourage others. The officers try to maintain discipline and morale. There are extra rations of wine on holidays. There are competitions and games when the weather permits, wrestling matches and foot races and contests of strength. The army is good at these things, at finding ways to keep men occupied, to channel their restlessness into controlled outlets. But it is not always enough. Winter grinds on, relentless and merciless. Yet there are also moments of unexpected beauty. One morning you wake to find that the storm has passed and the sky is clear. You step outside into a world transformed. The snow is pristine and white, covering everything, softening the harsh edges of the fort and the wall. The sun is rising in a blaze of pink and gold, the light reflecting off the snow so brightly that it hurts to look at. The air is cold but still, no wind, no clouds, just a crystalline clarity that makes every detail sharp and vivid. You stand on the rampart and look out over the landscape, the hills rolling away to the north, covered in white, utterly silent, utterly beautiful. For a moment you forget the cold and the hardship and the loneliness. For a moment you are simply present in this extraordinary place, in this unlikely life you have somehow found yourself living. The moment passes, and duty calls, and you return to the routine. But you carry the image with you, a reminder that even in the darkest times there is still beauty to be found if you are willing to see it. It is late spring, 2 years into your service, when the fragile peace of the frontier is broken. The first sign comes on a morning that seems like any other. You are on patrol along the wall when one of the sentries in turret 35A signals urgently. He has seen smoke to the north, multiple columns rising from beyond the nearest ridge. This is not the smoke of cooking fires or the controlled burning of fields. This is black smoke, thick and heavy. The smoke of structures burning. Something is wrong. The centurion sends a rider to the fort immediately to report the situation. Within an hour, the response comes. The prefect is ordering a reconnaissance in force. 2 sentries will march north to investigate, along with a turma of cavalry for scouting. You are selected to be part of this patrol. Along with most of your contubernium, there is a nervous energy in the air as the men assemble in the courtyard of the fort. This is not routine. This feels different, more serious than the usual minor incidents on the frontier. The column marches out through the north gate in good order, shields on backs, javelins in hand, moving at the standard pace of a Roman infantry unit. The cavalry ranges ahead, disappearing over the ridgeline to scout the route. The land to the north is familiar to you now, after 2 years of patrols, but today it feels different, charged with tension. You find yourself scanning the tree line more carefully, watching for any sign of movement, any indication of ambush. The veterans in the column are doing the same, their eyes never still, their hands resting lightly on their weapons. After an hour of marching, the cavalry returns with news. The scouts have found the source of the smoke. A Roman villa, one of the isolated farmsteads that exist in the territory immediately north of the wall, has been attacked and burned. The owners, a retired centurion, and his family who had taken land in the area, have been killed. The livestock has been driven off. The buildings are still smoldering, and there are signs that a significant war band, perhaps 50 or 60 men, was responsible. The tracks lead northwest, toward the territory of a tribe that has been increasingly hostile over the past year. The prefect's orders are clear. The patrol is to pursue the raiders if possible, or at minimum to demonstrate Roman strength and determination. The column picks up the pace, moving at the quick march now following the cavalry scouts. The mood has shifted from nervous anticipation to grim determination. An attack on a Roman citizen, especially a veteran, is a serious matter. It cannot go unpunished or it will encourage further raids. By midday, the cavalry spots the warband. They are moving along a valley between two hills, driving a herd of stolen cattle and sheep. They have not been expecting pursuit so quickly, and they are not prepared for a fight. The prefect makes his decision swiftly. The cavalry will swing wide to cut off the warband's retreat. The infantry will advance in battle formation. With luck, the raiders can be trapped and dealt with decisively. The sentries deploy from marching column into battle line, a maneuver you have practiced countless times in drill but which feels entirely different. Now when the enemy is visible on the hillside ahead, you take your position in the formation, shield on your left arm, javelin in your right hand, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men of your contubernium. Gaius is to your left, solid and calm. Titus is to your right, breathing heavily, his face set in concentration. The centurion walks along the line, checking the formation, offering words of encouragement or warning as needed. Then he takes his position at the front, facing the enemy. The warband has seen the Roman formation now. They are shouting, trying to decide what to do. Some of them are armed with spears and shields, others with swords or axes. They are not armored, most of them wearing only tunics or cloaks. They are outnumbered, perhaps 40 of them against more than 100 Roman soldiers, but they are warriors, proud men who have raided Roman territory and who cannot simply surrender without losing honor. Their leader, a tall man with a red cloak and a bronze torque around his neck, is shouting orders, trying to organize them into a line. The Roman formation advances steadily, shields locked, moving at the measured pace of the infantry drill. The centurion calls out the cadence, keeping the line straight and cohesive. At 50 yards, he gives the order to prepare javelins. You bring your pilum to the ready position, holding it loosely, feeling its balance. At 30 yards, the order comes. Release. The entire front rank of the formation hurls their javelins in a coordinated volley. The heavy weapons arc through the air, a deadly rain of iron-tipped wood. Several of the tribesmen fall, struck down. Others raise their shields. But the Roman pilum is designed to penetrate shields, its long iron shaft bending on impact, making the shield useless and forcing the warrior to discard it. The warband wavers. Their formation, such as it was, is disrupted. Some men are fleeing, others are charging forward in a desperate attack, others are simply standing in confusion. The Roman line does not waver. At 10 yards, the order comes to draw swords. The gladius, the short stabbing sword that is the primary weapon of Roman infantry, comes smoothly from its scabbard. You brace yourself, shield up, sword ready, and then the lines collide. The impact is stunning, a crash of shield on shield, men pushing and straining against each other. The noise is overwhelming, metal on metal, men shouting and cursing and screaming. The smell is immediate and intense, sweat and leather and the metallic tang of blood. There is no time to think, only to react, to follow training, to do what you have been drilled to do 1,000 times. You push forward with your shield, using its weight to batter the man in front of you. You stab with your sword, short controlled thrusts aimed at any exposed flesh, the belly, the thigh, the arm. Next to you, Gaius is doing the same. His movements economical and efficient. Titus is roaring, his huge frame driving into the enemy line like a battering ram. The fight lasts perhaps 5 minutes, though it feels much longer. The tribesmen are brave and skilled, but they are not trained to fight as a unit, and they are not equipped to face Roman heavy infantry. The Roman formation holds, a wall of shields and swords that slowly, inexorably pushes forward. Men fall on both sides. You see a Roman soldier go down with a spear in his side. You see a tribesman take a sword thrust to the throat and collapse, blood spraying. You do not allow yourself to think about what you are doing. You simply do it. Stab and push, following the rhythm drilled into you. And then suddenly, it is over. The warband breaks. The survivors turn and flee, throwing down their weapons, running for the hills. The centurion orders the cavalry to pursue, but not too far. There is no point in chasing scattered men into terrain where ambush is possible. The Roman line halts, holding formation until the order comes to stand down. Only then do you lower your shield and look around at what you have done. There are bodies on the ground, 15 or 20 tribesmen dead or dying. On the Roman side, there are casualties too. 3 men dead, another half-dozen wounded, some seriously. The medics are already moving among the wounded, providing what aid they can. The prisoners, 5 men who surrendered, or who were too injured to flee, are being rounded up by the guards. The stolen livestock, the reason for all of this, are milling about, confused and unguarded. Soldiers are already moving to collect them, to bring them back to the fort as evidence of Roman justice. You stand among the carnage, your sword bloody, your hands shaking with adrenaline. This was your first real combat, your first time killing another human being. You look down at the dead tribesman at your feet, a young man perhaps your own age, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. You feel nothing, or rather you feel too much, a confusion of emotions that you cannot name, relief that you survived, horror at what you have done, pride that you performed your duty, disgust at the blood and the smell and the waste of it all. Gaius puts a hand on your shoulder, says something you do not really hear, offers you water from his canteen. You drink mechanically, still staring at the dead man. The march back to the wall is long and somber. The wounded are carried on improvised stretchers. The prisoners are bound and made to walk in the center of the column. The cattle and sheep are driven along behind. The men are quiet, each processing the experience in his own way. By the time you reach the fort, it is dark. The casualties are taken to the hospital. The prisoners are locked in the guardhouse. The livestock are penned. The men are dismissed to the barracks. You clean your equipment, carefully washing the blood from your sword and shield, oiling the blade, checking for damage. The routine of maintenance is comforting, familiar, something concrete to focus on. That night, lying in your bunk, you cannot sleep. You keep seeing the face of the young tribesman, keep feeling the moment when your sword found flesh, keep hearing the sounds of the battle. You know that this is what you signed up for, what you trained for. You know that it will get easier, that the veterans do not seem troubled by such things. But right now, in the darkness, you are troubled. You are changed by what you have done. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. You are no longer a recruit, no longer innocent. You are a soldier in truth, now blooded, proven. And you know that this was not the last time, that there will be other patrols, other raids, other moments of violence. This is the reality of the frontier, the price of holding the wall, and you will pay it, because that is your duty, because that is what Rome demands, because there is no other choice. In the years that follow your first taste of combat, you come to understand that life at the wall is not only defined by duty and discipline and the occasional violence. It is also shaped by faith, by the need to find meaning and protection in a world where death can come suddenly and where the familiar certainties of home are far away. The garrison of Vercovicium is a religious place, filled with altars and shrines and temples, with prayers offered to gods old and new, with rituals that mark the passage of time and provide comfort to men far from home. The official religion of the army is the state cult of Rome, centered on the worship of Jupiter and the genius of the emperor. Every month on the calends there is a formal ceremony in the Principia, the headquarters building, where the entire garrison assembles to honor the gods and to renew their oaths of loyalty. The standards of the cohort are brought out from their shrine, sacred objects that embody the unit's honor and identity. Incense is burned, prayers are chanted in formal Latin, animals are sacrificed, their blood offered to the gods, their entrails examined for omens. The prefect presides over these ceremonies with appropriate solemnity, and all the soldiers participate, regardless of their personal beliefs. This is not optional. This is the glue that holds the empire together, the shared ritual that binds soldiers to Rome. But alongside this official religion, there flourishes a bewildering diversity of private faiths. Walk through the vicus or the fort itself, and you will find shrines to dozens of gods from all the corners of the empire. There are altars to Mars, the god of war, naturally popular among soldiers. There are dedications to Fortuna, the goddess of luck, whose favor every soldier craves. There are shrines to the local Celtic deities, gods of springs and groves and hills, who were worshipped here long before Rome came, and who have been respectfully incorporated into the Roman pantheon. The spring that provides water to the fort is sacred to a local goddess named Coventina, and soldiers regularly throw coins into its waters as offerings, asking for her protection. There are also gods from the Far East, brought to Britain by soldiers and merchants from distant provinces. You see shrines to Syrian deities, to Egyptian gods like Isis and Serapis, to obscure Persian spirits. The Romans are remarkably tolerant of religious diversity, understanding that in an empire as vast and varied as theirs, uniformity of belief is impossible and perhaps undesirable. As long as you participate in the official state ceremonies and honor the emperor, you are free to worship whichever gods give you comfort. But there is one cult that is different, one faith that has spread through the army like wildfire, and that offers something unique to soldiers. This is the mystery religion of Mithras, the Persian god of light and contracts and cosmic justice. Gaius, who has been initiated into the Mithraic mysteries, finally invites you to attend a ceremony. It is winter again, several years into your service, and the invitation comes on a dark evening when the wind howls outside the barracks. You follow Gaius through the vicus, away from the well-lit streets, into a quieter area near the edge of the settlement. Here, disguised as an ordinary building from the outside, is the Mithraeum. You descend a flight of stone stairs into an underground chamber, a long, narrow room lit by oil lamps. The ceiling is low and vaulted, painted with stars to represent the cosmos. Along the sides of the room are stone benches where the initiates sit during ceremonies. At the far end there is an altar, and above it a remarkable relief carving in stone. It shows Mithras, a young god in Persian dress, slaying a bull. The god's face is turned away from his victim, as if he regrets the necessity of the sacrifice. Around the central scene are other figures, a snake, a dog, a scorpion, a raven, mysterious symbols whose meaning is known only to the initiated. The chamber is already half full of men, soldiers in civilian clothes, sitting quietly on the benches. There are perhaps 30 of them, representatives of the various centuries of the garrison. You recognize some faces, men you have seen in the fort or on patrol, but here ranks do not matter. In the cult of Mithras, all initiates are brothers, equal before the god. The atmosphere is solemn, almost sacred. This is not like the public ceremonies in the Principia. This is intimate, personal, a brotherhood of men who have chosen to share in these mysteries. The ceremony begins with prayers in Latin and in Persian, languages most of the men do not fully understand, but whose sounds have become familiar and meaningful through repetition. There is incense burning, filling the chamber with sweet smoke. There are hymns sung in a droning, hypnotic manner. And then there is a ritual meal, bread and wine shared among the initiates, a communion that binds them together. The leader of the congregation, a senior soldier called the pater or father, speaks about the teachings of Mithras, about the struggle between light and darkness, about the importance of loyalty and courage and endurance, about the promise of immortality for those who remain faithful. You find yourself moved by the ceremony in a way you did not expect. Here, in this underground chamber, surrounded by your fellow soldiers, you feel a sense of belonging that goes beyond the mere institutional bonds of the army. This is a spiritual family, a community of men who have chosen to share something sacred, who support each other not just in battle but in the deeper struggles of life. The Mithraic cult offers answers to questions that the official state religion does not address. What happens after death? How should a man live? What gives meaning to existence? Mithrax, the god who slew the cosmic bull to bring life to the world, the god who ascended to heaven and who watches over his faithful, offers hope and purpose to men who desperately need both. As you leave the Mithraeum that night, climbing back into the cold, dark streets of the Vicus, you understand why this cult has become so popular among soldiers. It is not just the rituals or the theology, it is the community, the sense that you are part of something larger and more meaningful than the daily grind of military service. It is the assurance that your suffering and your sacrifice have cosmic significance, that you are a soldier not just of Rome but of the light itself, fighting against the forces of chaos and darkness. In the years to come you will attend many more ceremonies in the Mithraeum. You will advance through the cult's 7 grades of initiation, each marked by new revelations and new responsibilities. The faith will sustain you through the hardships ahead, give you strength when your own reserves are exhausted, connect you to a brotherhood that transcends the boundaries of units and nationalities. But Mithras is not the only god you pray to. Like most soldiers, you are pragmatic in your religious practice, hedging your bets, appealing to whichever deity might help in a particular situation. Before a dangerous patrol, you offer a coin at the shrine to Mars. When you are sick, you pray to Aesculapius, the god of healing. When you receive a letter from home, you thank Mercury, the messenger god. When you survive another winter, another year, you make an offering to Fortuna, grateful for her continued favor, and you never forget to honor the genius of the emperor, the divine spirit that protects Rome, and by extension protects you. Religion at the wall is not a matter of theological debate or philosophical speculation. It is practical, immediate, necessary. You live in a dangerous world where death is always close, where the future is uncertain, where you are far from everything familiar. The gods, whichever gods you choose, provide comfort and hope. They offer explanations for the inexplicable, meaning for the meaningless. They connect you to traditions that stretch back centuries, to your ancestors and your homeland. And they bind you to your comrades, creating communities within the larger community of the garrison. In a world of stone and cold and violence, faith is what makes life bearable, what reminds you that you are more than just a soldier, more than just a tool of empire. You are a human being with a soul, with hopes and fears, and a deep need to believe that your life has purpose. The gods in their many forms provide that purpose, and for that you are grateful. As the decades pass, as you grow from a young recruit into a veteran soldier, you begin to notice subtle changes in the wall and in the garrison that defends it. It happens slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, like the erosion of stone by wind and water. But over time the changes accumulate, and you realize that the frontier you knew in your early years is not the frontier that exists now. The empire itself is changing, beset by pressures from without and rot from within. And Hadrian's wall, that magnificent barrier at the edge of the world, is beginning its long, slow decline. The first signs are small. The garrison's strength is reduced. Where once your cohort numbered a full 1,000 men, now it struggles to maintain 600. The missing soldiers have not been replaced. They have been withdrawn, sent to other frontiers where the need is more urgent, where the threats are more immediate. The empire is overstretched, trying to defend thousands of miles of border with an army that is no longer growing, no longer easily replenished. Every crisis in Gaul or on the Rhine or in the east means fewer men for Britannia, fewer men for the wall. The quality of recruits changes too. Where once the auxiliaries were drawn from the conquered but still vigorous tribes of the provinces, now the army increasingly recruits from within the families of soldiers, sons following fathers into service, men who have never known any life except the military. These hereditary soldiers are competent enough, but they lack the fierce energy of the earlier generations, the men who came to the army seeking citizenship and advancement. Now service is an obligation, a duty inherited along with your father's equipment and your family's plot of land in the Vicus. The fire that once animated the garrison is dimming. The supply system becomes less reliable. The roads to the south are still maintained, but the convoys are smaller and less frequent. There are periods when the garrison runs short of essential supplies, when rations are reduced, when equipment repairs must be delayed because the necessary materials have not arrived. The great administrative machine that once supported the frontier so efficiently is beginning to sputter. The provincial governors have other concerns, other priorities. Britannia is no longer the vital strategic province it once was. It is becoming a backwater, an afterthought, a burden rather than an asset. You are now in your 15th year of service, a senior soldier, an immune who no longer performs routine guard duties, but who serves as an instructor for the younger recruits. You have survived wounds and sickness and the grinding attrition of frontier life. You have watched many comrades die, or desert, or simply break under the strain. You have become what you once admired and feared, a grizzled veteran who knows every trick, every shortcut, every way to make life at the wall slightly more bearable. And you have watched the wall itself begin to crumble, not dramatically but steadily, inexorably. Sections of the wall that once were pristine now show signs of neglect. Stones have fallen from the parapet and have not been replaced. Mortar has crumbled and the gaps widen with each winter's freeze and thaw. Some mile castles have been abandoned entirely, their garrisons pulled back to the forts, their gates left unmanned. The frontier is being consolidated, concentrated on the most defensible positions, while the less critical sections are allowed to decay. It is a rational response to reduced resources, but it is also an admission of weakness, a recognition that Rome can no longer maintain the comprehensive system of control that Hadrian envisioned. The relationship with the tribes to the north changes as well. As the garrison weakens, the tribes become bolder. Raids increase in frequency and scale. Villages that once paid tribute to Rome now withhold it. Chiefs who once sent their sons to be educated in Roman ways now send warriors to test the defenses. The balance of power that once favored Rome decisively is shifting. The wall still stands, still functions as a barrier, but it no longer inspires the same fear and respect that it once did. The barbarians know that the empire is weaker than it was, and they are probing for opportunities. You are there when the order comes that signals the beginning of the end. It is winter, late in the reign of an emperor whose name you barely know, a distant figure in Rome who has never seen this frontier and who never will. A courier arrives with dispatches from the provincial capital. The prefect reads them in the Principia, and then he summons the centurions. The news spreads quickly through the garrison. The cohort is being withdrawn, not all of it, but half the strength. 3 centuries out of 6 are being ordered to march south. They will embark from the port at Eboracum and sail to Gaul, where the Rhine frontier is under severe pressure from Germanic invasions. The remaining 3 centuries will be expected to hold the fort with whatever local levies can be recruited to make up the numbers. The departure of half the garrison is a solemn affair. The men who are leaving are your comrades. Men you have served with for years, brothers in all but blood. You watch them assemble in the courtyard of the fort on a grey March morning. They are in full kit, shields and javelins and packs, ready for the long march south. The standards are unfurled, the trumpets sound, and the column marches out through the south gate. You stand on the rampart and watch them disappear down the road, heading for a war on a different frontier, a war that most of them will not survive. You feel their loss acutely. The fort feels emptier, more vulnerable, less like the invincible Roman stronghold it once was. The years that follow are difficult. The reduced garrison struggles to maintain the routine. Patrols are less frequent. Sections of the wall go unwatched for days at a time. The vicus, sensing the weakness, becomes more chaotic. Crime increases. The prefect's authority is challenged. There are rumors of mutiny, though they come to nothing. The men who remain are tired, aging, disillusioned. The grand purpose that once animated the frontier is fading into a simple struggle for survival, for getting through each day, each season, each year. You complete your 25 years of service in this diminished world. The ceremony in which you receive your honest missio, your honorable discharge, is perfunctory, attended by a handful of officers and a few fellow veterans. You are presented with your diploma, a small bronze tablet engraved with the details of your service and the grant of citizenship that is your reward. You are a Roman citizen now, after a quarter century of waiting. But the citizenship feels less valuable than it once would have. The empire that granted it is visibly weaker, less stable, less eternal than it once seemed. Many veterans choose to stay near the wall, taking land in the vicus or nearby villages, marrying their unofficial wives officially, now that they are civilians, raising children in the shadow of the frontier. You consider this option. You have few ties to your homeland. The people you knew are long dead or scattered. This place, for all its harshness, has become home. You know its stones and its weather and its people. But in the end you decide to stay not out of love but out of a lack of alternatives. Where else would you go? What else would you do? You have been a soldier for your entire adult life. The wall is all you know. And so you settle in the vicus, taking a small plot of land, building a timber house, marrying the woman who has been your unofficial partner for the past 10 years. You have 2 children already, both boys who have grown up in the vicus and who know no other life. Perhaps they will join the garrison when they come of age. Perhaps they will continue the family tradition of service, or perhaps they will find some other way to survive, some other accommodation with the changing world. The years pass. You grow older, slower, less certain. The wall still stands, but it is a shadow of what it once was. The garrison is now a skeleton force, barely able to man the forts, let alone patrol the length of the frontier. The vicus shrinks as people drift away, seeking security in more settled regions to the south. The supply convoys stop coming. The provincial administration collapses. And then one year the pay does not arrive. The soldiers wait, patient at first, then angry. then desperate. Some desert, others turn to banditry, raiding the very civilians they are supposed to protect. The chain of command breaks down. The prefect disappears, fleeing south with his family. The centurions try to hold things together, but it is hopeless. Finally, in a year that you will later struggle to remember clearly, the last of the garrison marches away. They are being withdrawn to defend the provincial capital, or perhaps they are simply abandoning a post that has become untenable. They do not invite the veterans to join them. You stand with a small crowd of civilians from the vicus and watch the column depart through the south gate. The standards are still flying, though they are tattered and faded. The men still march in formation, though there are gaps in the ranks. And then they are gone, and the fort is empty for the first time in 300 years. The wall does not fall in a day or a year. It decays slowly, abandoned, no longer defended, no longer necessary. The tribes from the north do not pour across it in a great invasion. Instead, they gradually move into the empty lands, settling in the abandoned forts, using the stones of the wall to build their own houses and barns. The frontier blurs and then disappears. Roman authority in northern Britannia fades away, not with a dramatic collapse but with a whimper, a slow retreat southward that leaves the wall and its garrisons as relics of a vanished age. You live to see this transformation, though you barely understand it. You are an old man now, your soldier's body bent and broken by decades of hardship. You sit outside your house in the vicus and watch the world change around you. The empire you served, the vast and seemingly eternal structure that gave meaning to your life, is pulling back, contracting, dying. The wall still stands, a massive presence on the landscape, but it no longer divides anything. It is just stone now, purposeless, a monument to a power that no longer exists. And you are just an old soldier, watching the long shadow of Rome fade into the northern mists, remembering a time when the wall was mighty and the empire was forever, knowing that both were illusions, fragile and temporary, like everything human in this world. And so our journey through time comes to an end, though the story of Hadrian's wall does not end with the departure of the last Roman soldiers. The wall remained, a massive stone presence on the landscape, gradually being reclaimed by nature and by the people who had once watched it from the hills. For centuries after Rome fell, the wall stood as a boundary marker, as a source of building stone, as a reminder of an empire that had vanished, but whose monuments endured. Farmers quarried its stones to build houses and barns. Shepherds sheltered their flocks in the ruins of the mile castles. Travelers marveled at the scale of the construction and wondered what kind of people could have built such a thing. In time, the wall became myth as much as history. Stories were told about giants who had built it, about ancient kings and lost civilizations. The true story, the story of the auxiliary soldiers from across the empire who had stood watch on the ramparts, who had endured the brutal winters and the moments of violence, who had lived and died in service to a distant emperor, was forgotten. The wall became a ruin, romantic and mysterious, its original purpose obscured by the passage of centuries. But the wall did not disappear. It could not disappear. Too massive, too solidly built, too deeply embedded in the landscape, it remained. And in time, as scholarship replaced myth, as archaeology uncovered the truths buried beneath the centuries of decay, the real story began to emerge again. Today, nearly 2,000 years after it was built, Hadrian's Wall is recognized as one of the most significant Roman monuments in existence. It has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected and preserved for future generations. Millions of people visit it each year, walking its length, exploring the ruins of its forts, standing on its ramparts, and looking out over the same landscape that you once watched for signs of raiders and invaders. The archaeological discoveries along the wall have been extraordinary. At the fort of Vindolanda, just south of the wall, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of wooden writing tablets, preserved for centuries in the waterlogged soil. These tablets, inscribed with ink in cursive Latin script, are personal letters and military reports and shopping lists and birthday invitations, the everyday documents of garrison life. They give us voices from the past, the actual words of the men and women who lived on the frontier. We can read the letter of a soldier requesting more beer and warm socks to be sent from home. We can read the birthday invitation sent by one officer's wife to another. We can read the duty rosters and the supply requests and the complaints about the weather. These tablets, mundane and fragmentary as they are, bring the human reality of the frontier to life in a way that no grand historical narrative ever could. At Housesteads, the fort we knew as Vercovicium, the ruins have been extensively excavated and preserved. You can walk through the remains of the barracks where you once slept. You can see the latrines, the granaries, the headquarters building, the commanding officer's house. You can climb to the ramparts and stand where you once stood on watch, looking out over the same valleys and hills. The stone is weathered now, worn by wind and rain and the passage of time, but the layout is clear, the purpose evident. This was a military machine, designed and built with precision and care, a testament to Roman engineering and organization. All along the wall there are sights that speak to the lives we have explored together. At Chester's there is a remarkably well-preserved bathhouse, its rooms and heating systems still visible, allowing visitors to understand the sophistication of Roman bathing culture even on the distant frontier. At Corbridge, there is a supply depot where the garrison's equipment and food were stored and distributed, a reminder of the vast logistical system that kept the frontier functioning. At Burdoswald, there is evidence of how the fort continued to be occupied long after the Roman withdrawal, a bridge between the Roman and the post-Roman worlds. And along the entire length of the wall there are the remains of mile castles and turrets, the small outposts that formed the backbone of the frontier system. The wall itself, though robbed of much of its stone over the centuries, still survives in substantial sections, in places, particularly along the Windsill Ridge where the fort of Vercovicium stands. The wall rises to nearly its original height, a grey line of stone snaking across the dramatic landscape. Walking this section today, you can appreciate the ambition and the achievement of the builders. The wall follows the contours of the ridge, rising and falling with the natural defenses, a perfect marriage of engineering and terrain. Stand here on a clear day, and you can see for miles in every direction the same views that the centuries once had, the same sense of being at the edge of something vast and significant. What does the wall tell us? Nearly 2 millennia after it was built, it speaks to the reach and the ambition of the Roman Empire, an empire that could construct a barrier 73 miles long across the width of an island at the furthest edge of the known world. It speaks to Roman engineering skill, the ability to survey and plan and execute a project of this scale with precision and durability. It speaks to Roman military organization, the system that could garrison and supply and maintain a frontier for 3 centuries. But it also speaks to the limits of empire, to the recognition that even Rome could not conquer everything, that there were boundaries beyond which expansion was not possible or desirable. The wall is an admission of limits, a line drawn not in confidence but in pragmatism, a recognition that sometimes the best strategy is not to advance but to consolidate, to defend, to hold what you have. And the wall speaks, most powerfully, to the human cost of empire. Every stone in the wall represents hours of labor, physical effort expended by men far from home, working in difficult conditions, building something that would outlast them by centuries. Every fort along the wall represents years of garrison duty, soldiers standing watch, enduring boredom and hardship and occasional violence, performing a duty that was essential but unglamorous. Every inscription found at the wall, every altar erected by a soldier to his gods, every personal item discovered in the ruins speaks to individual human lives, to hopes and fears and small acts of devotion and courage that have mostly been forgotten but which in aggregate created and maintained this extraordinary frontier. The men who built and garrisoned Hadrian's wall were not heroes in the conventional sense. They were professional soldiers, auxiliaries drawn from the provinces, men serving for pay and for the promise of citizenship, men doing a job that was often tedious and sometimes deadly. They did not conquer kingdoms or win glorious battles. They stood watch, they patrolled, they maintained order, they held the line. Their individual stories are mostly lost to history, their names forgotten, their graves unmarked or scattered across a landscape that has changed beyond recognition. But collectively they accomplished something remarkable. They created and maintained a frontier system that functioned for 3 centuries, that protected a province and controlled trade and imposed order on a contested landscape. They were the unglamorous but essential workers of empire, the men who made Roman power a reality on the ground. Today, when you visit Hadrian's Wall, when you walk its length or explore its forts or stand on its ramparts, looking out over the northern hills, you are walking in the footsteps of those soldiers. You are seeing what they saw, though through eyes separated by 2,000 years. The landscape has changed. The forests have grown back or been cleared again, the villages have come and gone, but the wall endures, a connection to the past, a reminder that history is not just the story of emperors and generals, but also the story of ordinary people, soldiers and settlers and families, who lived and worked and loved and suffered in places far from the centers of power, on the edges of empire, at the frontiers of the world. And so, dear listener, our story ends here, at the wall, in the ruins of a frontier that once divided worlds. We have walked together through the experience of life at this remote outpost, from the arrival of a young recruit through years of service to the long decline and abandonment. We have stood watch on the ramparts in the cold wind. We have trained and fought and worshipped and survived. We have been part of a vast military machine, a tiny component in a system that shaped the history of Europe and the Mediterranean. And we have seen that machine slowly wind down, seen the empire pull back, seen the frontier fade into memory and then into ruin. The wall reminds us that all human endeavors, even the mightiest empires, are temporary. Rome seemed eternal to those who served it, but it was not. The frontier seemed permanent, but it was not. The soldiers who defended it are gone, returned to dust centuries ago, yet something remains. The stones remain, the ruins remain, the story remains. And in remembering that story, in walking through the landscape where it took place, in imagining the lives of those forgotten soldiers, we connect ourselves to the vast sweep of human history, to the countless men and women who came before us, who faced their own challenges and fears and duties, who lived and died and left behind traces that we can still read if we know how to look. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. Thank you for walking the wall with me, for standing watch in the cold dawn, for enduring the harsh winters and the moments of violence, for experiencing what it meant to live at the edge of empire. The archive of history will always be here, waiting to take you back to other times and places, to other stories of human experience across the centuries. But for now, our time at Hadrian's Wall has come to an end. The frontier is quiet, the watch is over. The long shadow of Rome has faded into the northern mists. Rest well, dear listener. Sleep peacefully, and dream, if you will, of distant ages, of stone walls and cold winds, of empires that rose and fell, of ordinary people who left their marks on history in ways both large and small. Until we meet again, I wish you a calm and restful night. Good night.